interesting talk. So next up, we've got Jo Clark, who is the PI of Landwise at Reading, so one of the 3 projects funded through the NERC NFM programme. And she is going to be talking to us about a more interdisciplinary and participatory approach to ensure that research is addressing questions of importance to people and organisations beyond academia. Off you go, Jo.
Okay, thank you, Emma. What an introduction. I hope I can live up to that. So thanks for Phil for setting the scene. So this, I guess, is the Landwise, how we've kind of worked with community in Landwise, adopting the co-production model. So basically what I'm going to present is a summary of the whole project that the whole team has contributed to, and the particular individuals have actually made slides that are in this presentation. So that's Angie Elwyn, a postdoc who finished in summer, James Flake from CH, and Barbara Percy. The reason why I'm having problems with the reason why I haven't written everyone's name is that it's quite a long list. We have over 48 partners in the Landwise project. We have around 28 researchers. We have people from policy, flood groups, farm advisors, farmers, conservation NGOs, local flood authorities, water utilities, and catchment partnerships. So we have quite a large group of people contributing to this project, and all of them have contributed in many and varied ways. And I'd just like to acknowledge their time, ideas, and enthusiasm here. So for Landwise, we're focusing in the Thames. So we're looking at the West Thames area. This is kind of the rural upstream area from London. So we're looking at upstream from Maidenhead. We're looking at the whole area broadly. So this area sits on chalk and limestone, so very permeable soils, rocks with very shallow soils that contribute groundwater to the river flow. So we have rivers with high groundwater input. And then around the floodplain areas, we have sort of flatter land that's covered with clays, silts and clays, so flatter, much less permeable environment. So there's no peat. So I just like to notice here, our headwaters here are not dominated with peatland catchments, and peatland restoration isn't a solution for the Thames. It doesn't quite, I think some parts around Cirencester get to 300 metres altitude. Otherwise, this is very much a lowland catchment dominated by groundwater and agricultural land use. We're focusing to start with in a number of catchments within the area. So initially we started off with the Loddon and Pang and Upper Thames, and as our network and project grew, we've extended to include the OC, where an NFM scheme is under development, the Kennet, because of the fantastic work by Action for River Kennet in this area on farmer engagement and NFM, and also more broadly across the South Chiltern area. If you think of NFM kind of comprising 3 different sets of measures, so option 1 is about increasing infiltration and below ground water storage, option 2 is about managing the flow of water off the hill slopes into rivers, and option 3 is about managing what happens in the river channels. With Landwise, we're focusing very much on option 1 measures, looking at soil and land management. So quite a broad range of measures, what we can do with our land and soil. There's a lot of options available here, and this is really where the co-production element comes in, because we've really tried to take a steer from those people who actually manage land and own land about what the type of things they want to do with their land, rather than coming in and telling them what they should be doing. So starting from that perspective, so if we're trying to do a research project to help inform decisions being made about NFM, what sort of knowledge do we need? And that really depends on who we are. Who are we as decision makers? And as noted from the project partnership group you see backing this project, it's a very diverse community, and there have been different needs expressed about the type of evidence that's needed. This has happened before the NFM programme was set up. There's very, from the kind of research, maybe environment agency side, there's a strong steer towards modelling, and some conservation NGOs, some groups have expressed frustration with modelling. There's a whole politics around how models are used, how the knowledge from models can seem to somehow override community model. This is maybe a whole other presentation in another setting. But you know, so the use of models and models of knowledge has quite a lot of politics behind it as well. And some people just require very practical knowledge as well from their own experience. So I think if we want to be in the business of actually creating research that helps people make decisions, we need to take consideration of what they need, their views and their ideas too. And this is sort of thinking more broadly about the kind of changing ways that we've looked at science communication in this country over the last few decades. So traditionally, we've had more of a model of knowledge transfer, where researchers create knowledge and then we share it with our research users. And this is considered to come from this idea of a knowledge deficit, where our users have a deficit and the researchers fill that model. Now that has been debunked by quite a lot of people working on science communication. They don't like that model so much, although sometimes this does still seep into practice day to day. We've tried to move more towards a more knowledge exchange model, where actually there's recognition that you need a two-way flow of information between the research community and the research users. And this is kind of described more as a dialogue model, a kind of a general conversation, recognizing that both parties, both sides, have useful information to share. And this is one conceptual model published a few years ago about how this dialogue can play out. And this is between looking at shared knowledge systems between farmers and scientists. And I quite like it, because it just shows that, you know, farmers and scientists, we have some core concepts, but actually there are things that scientists know that maybe the farmers don't know. And likewise, there are things that farmers don't know that the scientists don't know. And by having this dialogue and sharing this information between the two communities, we can then actually expand our shared knowledge space to actually address some of these complex problems. And so in Landwise, we've kind of, as well as addressing the NFM question, we've looked to innovate methodologically in terms of how we can actually, how can we integrate some of this qualitative knowledge from what people know, what they know from their own experience about types of soil and land management measures and how that affects flooding, and how can we then use that to then quantify it, to bring in the biophysical, the technical skills that we have to provide that data. And this is what we've tried to do here.
Jo, just to let you know, 1 minute, thank you.
1 minute, was I late starting?
A little bit.
Okay, well, I've got a bit more than a minute. So we've got, so we built this process of research co-production in Landwise. So how it worked is, before the funding call, we actually had built long-term partnerships beyond the initial project scope, well, that we've been working with for a while, and we built on these relationships. And then we worked with our partners when we actually designed the project. And again, this is looking for their input and lead into actually shaping what we were looking at. And then with the project delivery, we've actually embedded working with various groups. So we've set up annual workshops for all participants where people can engage. We can also, we've also set up working groups around particular problems. And then we've also worked with existing groups to look at NFM scenarios with catchment partnerships. And then we have the more traditional project steer and engagement through advisory boards that is common to many other research projects. So it's the project delivery angle that I'm going to show a couple of examples here, probably at breakneck speed now. So one example here is from our workshop. This is where we've run workshops every year, where we've got people together around a range of activities. It's not just been presentations, it's been asking people to share. We had the team for visual music come in to try and capture our conversations and this artwork that, of course, you know, was a great centerpiece to the event and really helped facilitate the around games and breakout groups. We found from the feedback from the event that what our partners really loved about this kind of co-production, and again, it's about the dialogue, it was the networking that was actually really valued the most across everyone attending, and learning from that experience and conversation. And the research kind of came out at the bottom as being the less the less valuable things from the event. This is back to the kind of power of conversation. We also use the opportunity to gain a better understanding from our partners about the types of evidence that they need, and people really did value experiential and relationships. This is having a relationship with people and going to see things. And some of the sort of traditional scientific evidence actually was seen quite negatively and less valuable. So technical observed like field data is actually seen more positively than modelling. And so this really has given us a steer about how to use the models within the project, how to address them, and how we should communicate what we're doing with the work. So this input at the start of the project by capturing views from our partners is really helpful to actually make sure we deliver meaningful results in the end. So in terms of the working groups, with the farmer knowledge, so we have this fieldwork challenge I noted about. There are many different types of soil and land management systems. Which ones do we focus on? How do we check the effects of management over soil type, and what sort of sampling methods do we use? So we set up a working group with farm advisors and farmers, got together at CEH. We did a bit of soil sampling together to harmonise our methods. We talked about different farming systems, and we came up with a broad scale field survey of 160 fields across the Thames area, looking at particular land use and management scenarios over agreed key soil types. And the key thing I'm going to pick out here is how we chose to design a sampling around arable. Now, from an environmental science side, there's a tendency to focus on crops. We think, we should look at maize, we should look at winter barley or particular crops, but actually the farmers told us the biggest question they had was whether they should have a rotation with grass or without grass, because if they had grass in their rotation, it meant they had livestock, and a number of farmers had got rid of the livestock maybe 20, 30 years ago, and there was a question about whether to bring the livestock back into their rotation to improve soil health. So, and they said the kind of crop type managed less. It was more about this rotation. So we took a steer from the farming community here in how we designed our sampling strategy to make sure that actually we were getting data that they would find useful and relevant for them. And they felt that this was a key management question in terms of the wider benefits for soil health, where they thought more could be delivered. And so we used their network of advisors to then actually roll out that sampling strategy across the Thames area, identifying a range of farms, 45 farms across the area, sampling over 160 fields, and that data is in the process of being analysed now. Final example here is from scenarios. So this is co-creating these NFM scenarios similar to the catchment partnership areas. And what we did was develop a method where we went from individual ideas, so people writing scores on a sheet, going through a sort of structured process to actually get an agreed catchment map of where NFM measures could be created. So we looked across these different areas, and we were able to prioritise the top NFM measures across the 11 measures that the Environment Agency have identified. And then we were able to create some maps based on local preferences for what people would like to see in certain areas based on certain landscape types. Now, as Phil noted, coronavirus has hit. All of this work was based on workshops and people huddling around a map, which I would say is probably one of the most powerful and strongest ways to engage, but it's not COVID secure. So in light of coronavirus, we're in the process of putting all this work into an interactive web tool to enable people to explore the data, maybe add more data remotely in a more COVID secure way. So this process, and again, we're iterating this design with the partners involved. So final thoughts on this. So my perception here is that research co-production is a kind of continual conversation between people that are affected by knowledge creation. It really needs time to listen. You need space to think and respond. And as researchers, we need to be flexible to kind of change our position on what we think about certain things. And for example, one of the sticking points in Landwise is this perception around crops being the thing we should focus on rather than management systems. So that's something where we've adapted our thinking. And here it's really an example of science communication that's actually embedded within the project delivery rather than being something that we do outside the project. So that's final thoughts there.
Thank you very much, Jo. Appreciate that. We're actually at the limit there. So any questions for Jo? If you could put it into the chat, and then Jo will be able to respond on the chat channel, if that's all right. And thank you very much, Jo. And we'll move on.